So a military force has no constant formation, water has no constant shape. The ability to gain victory by changing and adapting according to the opponent is called genius. Welcome to Small Unit Tactics, Lesson 2, Infantry Squad Formations in the Security Halt, presented for 1 SCE by 7th Surface Combat Elements Training Command. This course is part of the Basic Combat Training Syllabus in the FPS Combat module and is required for graduation with certification in Basic Combat Training. First thing we're going to talk about tonight is team formations. The two main formations we're going to be talking about for teams are the wedge and the file. These are for movement in open terrain. So this is when you're out on a, we'll call it a celestial object body surface. Just out in the open walking around. There are different movement techniques for enclosed spaces, urban terrain, and close quarters battle. We're not talking about those quite yet. That'll be in a future academic. So this is just, you're out diddy bopping on Daymar, okay? The first one we're going to talk about is the team wedge. This is the basic formation for the fire team. It's essentially the default formation. The normal interval is 10 meters between soldiers, but that interval can expand and contract. Remember the quote about water, depending on the terrain and other environmental factors. So when rough terrain and poor visibility or other factors make control of the wedge difficult, the interval can be reduced so that the team leader can see his or her team. Remember what we talked about in the last academics, no one is ever alone on the battlefield. And I'm going to expand on that concept for just a second. When I say alone, I mean you cannot see or hear the other members of your team. At the very least, it's that buddy team, but really ideally, if you're operating in a fire team, everybody needs to be able to see and talk to each other. So that the sides of that wedge can contract to the point where it's almost a file. And a file is just a line. You're standing in it like you're in line. Like you're in line at the grocery store, but a line is actually something different, and we'll talk about that also. So a file is just one behind the other. So when moving in less rugged terrain where control is easier, you can expand that out. And again, if you're walking in the middle of the open and you see C2 flying at you, and that thing's, that thing's probably got cluster bombs on it, you don't have to stay at that 10 meters either. It would behoove you to tell your guys to disperse and spread out, so it can go wider than that. And really what you're trying to manage here is your survivability as a group. So this is what a wedge looks like from above and behind. You can see here the team leader standing up front here. You have your automatic rifleman over here on the left. You have a rifleman over here on the right. And then you got your freelancing grenadier here that forgot his Goram helmet. So he's over here on the end. And then we have a stand-in here for a squad leader. So just the fire team would be just these four elements in this wedge shape, but they are dispersed at about 10 meters. So that's what 10 meters looks like. It's easy to tell in Star Citizen, especially if you're in a party. You got those the little Doritos, and you can check your range. But again, I don't want you to get too caught up on the 10 meters. You just want to be dispersed about this far, so it's not anything that's set in stone. So this is what it looks like graphically from the top down. Pretty easy. We already covered 10 meter spacing, about 45 degrees apart. Okay. And again, this can contract and expand as terrain dictates. Okay, so this would still essentially be considered a wedge, even though you're all tightened up here. If you need to do that because there's a huge rock or or you're going into a draw in the terrain that's gonna close you up a little bit, you guys want to stick together when you do that. So remember again that water quote, these things aren't set exactly in stone. It's more the principles of where your eyes are pointed, where your guns are pointed, and how much firepower, how much violence you can apply in different directions is kind of what I want you guys to get out of this. And it's also really important, if you haven't actually done this before in a game or in real life, this is a very simple, basic, and unfortunately boring way to start building the skill of knowing where your teammates are at, knowing where you're at in relation to them, and having an idea of your field of fire and how that relates to where other people can and can't shoot because of where everybody's located. Okay, so you can collapsed wedge, dang near looks like a file. Okay, so the wedge, like we said earlier, provides the most balance for the out between the wedge and the file. When you're facing forward like this, you've got 100% of your firepower. Each individual soldier has their lane of fire here, and everybody can shoot forward. So you can immediately apply 100% of your combat power to the front, which is advantageous. Hopefully you're moving towards the enemy, and you've got some overlap here. I got a little kill box going on here where even if nobody moves from where they're at right now, everybody can shoot forward. So this is kind of what it looks like from the side. You see Trevor in the front, he can shoot forward. You got Brat and Simon here in the middle. They can both shoot forward, and then you got the freelancing guy with his own helmet over here. He can shoot forward too. So gives you 100% of your team firepower front immediately, which is nice to have. Now when you do a left face, say you are reacting to contact and there's an enemy element over here that's shooting at you guys. When you do a left face here, you are losing one gun, but you still have 75% of your firepower going this way. Here, here, and then in react to contact for a team, this guy would run over here, and then you'd all start moving towards a firing line on this side. But still, 75% of your firepower is not bad. So that's what this like. You can see these guys just did a left face. Trevor can shoot, Brat can shoot, Drake can shoot, and Simon's gonna have to diddy bop his butt over here to the side. So that, you know, takes seconds, and when you're being shot at, seconds feel like minutes. I can tell you that firsthand. So this is a nice, good, flexible formation. And then if for some reason you had to turn 160, you might be the Bravo element. We'll show you a column here in a second. In the rear to pull rear security, you got 100% to the rear too. Here's a file. Nothing too complicated about this, right? You're just in a line, same spacing, about 10 meters apart. But this is going to be a much faster formation to use. Used when terrain precludes the use of a wedge. You might see this more in an urban environment where you're staying on one side of the street. But basically, this is just ducks in a row. This team leader can pick where he wants to go. Theoretically, he knows what he's doing and what he needs to get done, so he can move very quickly. And these guys don't have to think about, you know, their angles or anything like that. If you just maintain enough distance up to 10 meters to stay in visual and verbal contact with the other members of your team, this guy can be sprinting forward, and these guys are just following him without having to worry about any of the angles or anything like that. So it's very quick. The control is very easy. It's like a hey, follow me kind of thing. But you're sacrificing a lot of security to the front because now you only have one gun facing forward here. And you do have just one gun in the front here. You do have immediate firepower to the left. If you do a left face here, you're essentially in a firing line already. So that's a slight advantage, but it's a much bigger trade-off than you have with the wedge. And then again, if you had to do a 180 for one reason, you've only got one gun immediately to the rear. Okay, so this is, I'm going to show you a quick video just to kind of give you an idea how long it takes to go to a firing line from a file, which is forever if you're being shot at. So let's watch this real quick. You'll see they see an enemy or they receive contact, guns up, and then they start running up into a firing line. That's a good, I don't know, what was that, 10, 15 seconds? Which is forever when you're receiving fire. So, if you're thinking about leadership, those are some of the kinds of things to be thinking about. And know that if you're in this, if you're one of the soldiers in this formation, just start to become aware that I'm not going to be able to fight to the front for a minute. Seconds being minutes when you're being shot at. Here's a quick comparison table for the wedge and the file. The wedge, basic sort of default formation, easy control, good flexibility. You can get immediate fire in all directions, and you can even offset. Let's go back here. Again, like I was saying earlier, none of this is set in stone. It's more about water, right? So if this guy, if this buddy team is offset a little bit, naturally or on purpose due to unit SOP, you could have 100% fire in all directions. So again, this academics isn't establishing any SOPs for any units. That'll be done by unit leadership. This is just to give you a basic understanding of what's going on. And then the file for close terrain, low visibility, or high speed. Easiest control, like I said, the team leader can just take off and you're following, baby duck's following mama duck. It's a little less flexible because you don't have that firepower to the front, but you get immediate fire on the flanks. So it's kind of got the least amount of security between these two formations. Talk about squad formations next. Basically, we've got 3 of those. Again, we're talking about in the context of movement in open terrain. You have a column, which is a formation that's multiple units wide and multiple units deep. A line it can be a couple units deep, but the majority of the unit is going to be spread out from left to right. And then you have a file, which is the same as it is for the team. It's just one soldier behind the other all lined up. So you might recognize this from the last academics, the infantry squad overview. Just quick review, you have your alpha team leader, your automatic rifleman, alpha team leader, automatic rifleman, and grenadier. Let's switch to my laser pointer. And then you got the headquarters element, squad leader, machine gunner, or sniper team, RTO, and then your Bravo team. So you guys have actually seen this before. What you are actually looking at is called a squad column. Again, it's multiple units wide and multiple units deep, generally longer than it is wide. That's kind of the definition of a column. So with this, you're going to have your wedge. I think this is called fingertip if you're flying a spaceship. I'm looking at you, Fog. Spaceship. I think a finger or fingers. But you got your wedge here. Just like we talked about, this one is just offset to the other side. And you can set SOPs for that as you like. But the distance here, depending on your movement technique, which we'll talk about next time, is going to be between 20 and 50 meters. And that 20 to 50 meters is between the last element in this group and the first element in this group. So this is where you want your element, that's the spacing I'm talking about, is here and here. Okay, so if you're, well, I won't go into that. We'll talk about that with movement techniques. So 20 to 50 meters between each element here in this squad. And again, this is the best balance. You sacrifice a little bit of your firepower to the front because you've got a lot of guys stacked here that aren't going to be able to shoot through these guys. But we'll talk about a battle drill in the next academics that addresses that. But this is sort of the default for the squad. A squad line, it can look like this with the units in wedges, which kind of lets the squad leader see his team leaders and keep an eye on everybody. It can also just be straight up everybody shoulder to shoulder, spaced 10 meters apart, moving through a field. This gives you maximum firepower front. This is also kind of useful administratively if you're searching an area. If somebody drops something, if you're looking for an item on the ground, this would actually probably work in fairly well in Star Citizen. If you were looking for an item on the ground, on the surface, you could actually just do double arm interval where everybody puts their arms out and goes fingertip to fingertip, and you can very thoroughly search an area using this too. But primarily, you're going to have maximum firepower for front. So all these guys can shoot forward immediately, and you get good overlapping fields of fire. Every single member of the squad can immediately start shooting forward. They can start bounding up to a firing line, which we'll talk about in the movement techniques academics. But everybody's got their field of fire here forward that they can shoot in, and you get some really good kill boxes here where these guys overlap, where all these guys can shoot. This is just a massive amount of firepower facing forward. Like I think if we actually used this in the game, it might catch people quite off guard just because of the sheer amount of firepower you can immediately apply forward with this. Okay. And then file, it's essentially the same thing. Used for high speed, low visibility. And again, this isn't, this we have the alpha team leader leading, the squad leader in the middle, and the bravo team leader in the back. But if for some reason the squad leader needed to see what was going on up front so he could make snap decisions, he could move up here. The bravo team leader, if we needed a little bit more control in the rear of the formation, could be slotted in right there. So again, remember that quote from the beginning. This isn't set in stone. It can be changed. It can be changed on the fly. It'll be good to establish some SOPs so everybody has an idea of the basic ground rules, because you gotta know the rules basically before you can break the rules. So everybody should have a common understanding of the default way of doing things, but you can still modify it as you need to. But you need to have a good understanding of the fundamentals in order to do that. So here again we have just a quick formation comparison. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll let you can pause it here, and kind of check this out at your leisure. But column, again, primary is the primary formation, kind of the default formation, good balance, facilitates good maneuver and good dispersion. If an explosive device goes off, in this, say you're spaced out 50 meters, if a grenade goes off, some kind of explosive, bomb, missile, RPG, exploding hamster, whatever it is, goes off. If all these guys happen to be in the blast radius of whatever that is, these guys are generally going to be dispersed enough to survive that encounter. So you still have some of your combat power going there. So that's kind of what they're talking about there. So large fire to the flanks, just like we talked about with the team. Each one of those elements can just do immediate left or right face and have quite a bit of firepower. It's the most balanced formation. The line, again, maximum firepower, or administratively if you're searching for something on the ground, like Drake's helmet that he seemed to have misplaced. You got to be close together, and that's a good way to search. Control is a little lower than the column, and that has to do with moving. Everybody's dispersed out wider, so it makes communication a little more difficult. And then if you had to turn that whole element to the left or the right, it just takes a lot of time and coordination. It can turn into a clusterfuck really fast. So a little lower in the control than the column, and limited maneuver. But that trade-off you make is maximum firepower. It's a lot of, if you got grenade launchers and automatic riflemen and riflemen all blasting, that's a lot of firepower. And then the file essentially is the same as the team file. Okay, lastly, I'm going to talk real quickly about the security halt. The principle I want you to get out of this, if you haven't heard of it before, or even if you've got some experience, it's a good reinforcement and refresher. But the concept of 360-degree security is really important when you're halted. Even when you're moving, the rearmost soldier in the element and the leadership occasionally should be turning around. The leadership to check on their guys, and that very rear element just to do a quick security scan behind him. But you can't. It's harder to keep rear security when you're moving. Theoretically, everybody's head is on a swivel, and everybody's kind of watching in front, right? So theoretically, while you're moving, all this stuff back behind you has been at least visually scanned already once. So you don't necessarily, this guy back here doesn't need to be walking backwards, but he should spin around every once in a while to check the rear. This guy should be checking his guys every once in a while. Squad leader should be turning around every once in a while to check everybody. Same thing up here. But when you're halted, especially for an extended period, oh hey, look, there's another squad. If you're halted, especially for an extended period, the threats can come from any direction, and you sort of start to lose awareness of the battlefield around you. So what you will generally do is everybody will, you can do this collapsed or you can do it dispersed. It depends on the situation, on whether you want cover, whether you need concealment, whether you're just in the middle of an open field without any of that. But the general idea is that you get eyes and guns pointed in a 360-degree circle so that you are continuously scanning and building your awareness of the area immediately around the halted element. So in this case, we have the fields of fire here and eyes that are scanning sort of this arc of the circle, and that continues around. You cover in this arc. You can kind of think of it like your shield faces, right, when you're in one of the spacecraft. These guys should be scanning this way. These guys should be scanning this way. And it extends all the way around so that you form this 360-degree field where you constantly are searching and able to respond to threats. So that's the basic idea behind 360-degree security. It might not necessarily look this tight, right? And if you have like a machine gun team here, the squad leader will deploy them wherever he thinks they're needed, wherever the highest threat may be, or whatever requirements he might see for them. He'll slot them in wherever. But this again isn't really set in stone. So, like if we kind of look at a more practical example, this is sort of in an urban environment, but it's a good example of 360-degree security, where you have a building here, maybe some vehicles here, right? And so maybe this is like a sidewalk and an alley, and then you have the street out here. You still have guns and eyes pointed in all directions, right? So you got a couple guns pointed this way, you got a couple guns pointed this way, you got a couple guns pointed this way, a couple guns pointed this way, maybe one looking out over here. Maybe this guy even comes over to the car and is scanning the upper floors of this building. But again, just the idea is that you have eyes and guns in all directions. So for example, like when we've been practicing in Sandstorm, when everybody clusters around that ammo box and has their mitts in that ammo box, nobody's pulling security. We've had a couple people get shot doing exactly that, especially when it's set to Jeff mode. So that's a perfect example of when you would want to use 360 security. Everybody shouldn't be rearming at the same time, right? So like this squad leader may be talking to higher, he may be taking out his map because the platoon leader got him lost, or whatever it is. Or this might be the ammo point, right? And so we're guarding guys, and people will peel off one by one, or maybe two by two, to rearm. So 360-degree security is really important. This is just another example, maybe of an intersection, or maybe this is in an open field with a rock and tree and sleeping bantha over here. I don't know, but there's guns again in every direction. Okay. So a picture of that actually looks top down. This is just a fire team, and sometimes you have to do what you can to get that 360 degrees. So this is only 5 soldiers. So what we're trying to do here is we're covering north, right? This guy's covering north. This guy's covering south. So we're just getting like big arcs here. This soldier's covering west, and this soldier's covering east, and then we've got one pointed northeast. So at the very least, if it's just you and your 4-man team, you at least want to have a set of eyes in the cardinal directions. Okay, you might not have the luxury of having 360 degrees with overlapping fields of fire and everything's perfect and hunky-dory. Doesn't always happen that way. So we can kind of see on the ground here, we've got some eyes generally pointed in the 4 cardinal directions. So at this point, I'm just going to pick a spot where I can sort of reinforce, find some cover, and start pulling my own security here, okay? So that's a really critically important piece of it, 360-degree security, especially if we're in Star Citizen and we're out on a planet's surface, and who knows, we do have some geotachs in the org, so if we end up having an outpost somewhere, we might actually do some of these formations and movement techniques we'll talk about next time for security or presence patrols. So that's kind of all I got on it. Give me a second. I'm gonna unmute in the academics channel, and we'll do some questions. I'll try to make sure I get the desktop going here too. Okay, what questions do you guys have? Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's a good point. You do want to flow like that water, right? And there's trade-offs to be made. And I'll throw that video we got in when we were doing those movement techniques, capturing media. But yeah, there's trade-offs. So if like a good trade-off might be, okay, I'm gonna lose visual contact with a member of my team for a short time. I can still talk to them over my radio, but I'm going to lose visual contact with them for a minute because it's going to save my life. That might be a good trade-off to make. So again, that when we say alone on the battlefield, we mean both verbal communication and visual contact, right? Visual and verbal contact with your guys. So there are some instances where you might want to break those rules, but like I said earlier, you got to know the rules before you can break the rules. So that's an excellent point. And we'll talk a little bit more about movement and that kind of thing in the next academics. Anybody else? Nope. Anybody? All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Twitch, or if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to re-up those Prime subscriptions. Or if you want to subscribe for real, cool. Do what blows your skirt up. Visit our website at aurorarepublic.space. We're on Spectrum, Aurora Rep, Twitch, YouTube. Do all the thumbs and the happy things and subscribes, and thank you all very much for joining us.